They thought I would fold when they backed me into that glass-walled boardroom. But I had been preparing for this moment long before any of them learned how to spell licensing. Landon Pike leaned back in his chair, all confidence and inherited power, and said, "You've never been good with contracts." Maris, the company attorney, Dane Vickers, allowed himself a slow, amused smile, as if my entire career were a harmless misunderstanding. I breathed once, steady and full, and opened the thick licensing binder that had built this company's $800 million future. I flipped past sections no one at this table had ever read, stopping only when my fingers found the familiar crease. I turned the binder toward them. "Please read page 147, I said. My voice did not rise. It didn't need to. I drafted this contract. I am guessing you never made it this far. Landon's smirk faltered. Dane frowned as though the page itself had betrayed him. The board members leaned in. The room, moments earlier loud with subtle mockery, became so quiet I could hear someone's breath catch. Dane reached for the binder with a hand that wasn't as steady as he wanted it to be. He read the opening lines, and the color drained from his face. A chair scraped against the floor behind him. Landon straightened, furrowing his brow, suddenly aware that his attempt to humiliate me might have detonated something far larger than his pride. Their silence did not stun me. I had lived in silence for years. Silence they mistook for weakness. Silence they weaponized against me. Silence that now cracked open every assumption they had ever made. Before anyone dared speak, before Landon could form another insult shaped like a question, I closed the binder gently. The story you're about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at Herrevenge. It draws inspiration from the injustices many women face in the workplace: disrespect, favoritism, and age bias against midlife professionals. We tell this story to highlight the journey of a woman who rises, reclaims her worth, and refuses to let anyone define her value. This narrative is meant to inspire, heal, and remind you that self-respect is never something you ask permission for. All characters and events are purely illustrative. 2 months earlier, before anyone realized what I truly controlled, I was just Maris Calder, the quiet woman in the back of the room, the one they assumed would never speak loudly enough to matter. For 16 years at Horizon Systems, my name appeared on almost every major licensing document the company ever signed. Yet most people still treated me like a moving part in a filing cabinet. I preferred quiet, clean sentences over loud meetings, clarity over performance, but in a place like Horizon, volume often mattered more than accuracy. That morning's compliance meeting was already tense when I stepped in. Senior staff lined the conference table, and Landon Pike stood at the head as though he were auditioning for leadership instead of inheriting it. "Let's keep this fast," he said. "High level only." I opened my binder. "We have a renewal deadline with our Mid-Atlantic partners. If we miss the notification window..." Landon waved a hand. There she goes again. Maris and her deadlines. A few chuckles broke around the room. I kept my expression neutral. "It is not optional," I said. "If we do not notify them 14 days in advance, we lose." He cut in again. 14 days, 14 pages, 14 clauses. You see what I mean? He smirked at the executives. She is as quiet as wallpaper until she remembers another rule. Someone laughed louder than they needed to. Another avoided my eyes. I tried again. "If the renewal lapses, we risk penalties well into the 6-figure range." Landon leaned forward. "Maris, you get obsessed with the tiny stuff. We need innovators, big thinkers, not librarians." The word hung there. It was meant to sting, and it did. I stared down at my notes, steadying my breath. Dane Vickers, the company attorney, glanced at me and shrugged, as if to say this was the natural order of things. 16 years of building the legal spine of Horizon, and all anyone saw was a woman who talked too softly. I closed my binder slowly. If anyone noticed the way my hands tightened, they said nothing. Someone was already moving on to the next agenda item. My warning dissolved into the air like it had never existed. And yet, beneath their dismissal, something inside me shifted, not loudly, not visibly, but enough that I felt the room tilt just slightly as I stood to leave. When Horizon's founder, Richard Pike, officially stepped down, the handoff to his son felt less like succession and more like a performance staged for applause. Landon made his entrance at the all-staff meeting wearing a tailored suit and a grin sharpened by entitlement. "We're entering a bold new era," he announced. "Agile decisions. Disruption. Velocity." People nodded even though most of them had no idea what he meant. I watched quietly from the back. 16 years of work had taught me how leaders sounded when they did not yet understand what they were inheriting. After the meeting, HR called me into a private session with Landon and Dane Vickers. Landon perched on the edge of the table as though a chair could not contain him. "I'm evaluating every department," he said, "seeing who fits the new vision." Dane folded his hands. "Everything on the contract side is clean, nothing unusual." Landon nodded quickly, already losing interest. "Good, because honestly, Maris," he tilted his head, examining me like a piece of outdated equipment, "you sit there like a ghost. We need people with energy, not quiet." "I do my work," I said, my voice stayed calm. He laughed softly. "Yeah. But we're moving fast now. We need people who think big, not people buried in paperwork," Dane added. "Nothing in her files suggests she's irreplaceable." The casual dismissal struck harder than the words themselves. 16 years of structuring the legal backbone of Horizon. And they both spoke as though I were a temporary assistant. Landon tapped his fingers on the table. "I'm trimming anything that slows us down. Old processes. Old mindsets." His eyes flicked toward me. "Old roles. I hope your evaluation includes understanding the systems you want to change," I said. He blinked, caught off guard for a moment, but recovered with a smirk. "That's what people like you are for, until they're not." The meeting ended quickly. Landon already texting someone before I reached the door. As I walked out, I heard him say to HR, "Start drafting options. If we cut her, it has to be clean." I paused only long enough to steady my breath before continuing down the hall. 16 years earlier, Horizon Systems was nothing more than a rented space above a converted warehouse in Wilmington's old shipping district. The walls smelled of dust and hope. Richard Pike, the founder, paced constantly, chewing on the end of an unlit cigar. "They will try to take this from me one day," he muttered as he circled the table. "Investors, competitors, even board members. Someone will eventually try to carve out what we built." I sat with my laptop balanced on my knees. "Then let us make the licensing architecture impossible to carve." Richard stopped pacing. "That is why I hired you. Maris. You see the trapdoors before anyone else notices the floor." He trusted me more than he trusted the attorneys on retainer. He handed me authority rarely given to someone my age, then full authorship of the intellectual property structure, oversight of expansions, and signature privileges for certain clauses. I worked quietly, unseen, drafting a legal spine strong enough to survive storms he predicted but never described. "Hide protections where only someone patient would look," he said. "Bury them deep." So I did. I created small clauses, scattered across appendices and supplementary exhibits, clauses that ensured continuity of oversight, proper termination procedures, and signatory requirements that could not be easily circumvented. And then there was the one on page 147. I added it late one night, fingers numb from typing, breath fogging in the cold air of the warehouse loft. A sovereignty clause, subtle but powerful, ensuring that any global expansion required not just Richard's approval, but mine, not by title, but by name. Richard reviewed it once, nodded in satisfaction, and said, "This will outlive both of us." Executives over the years skimmed the document, stopping somewhere near page 30, assuming the rest was legal garnish. They never questioned the pages they ignored. But I always remembered page 147. I remembered writing it for the inevitable day when someone arrogant enough, someone careless, would try to remove me without understanding what I had built. Landon Pike was exactly that someone. HR called me into the strategy room just after noon. The air inside felt staged, as if someone had rehearsed how the chairs should angle toward me. Landon Pike lounged at the table, tapping a pen against his notebook with theatrical boredom. Beside him sat Rowan from HR, nervously smoothing the corners of a manila folder. "Let's be efficient," Landon said. "We're restructuring." Rowan cleared her throat. "This is part of a broader realignment across several departments." I sat, folding my hands. "What does that mean for my role?" Landon leaned back, grinning like he had been waiting for that question. "Maris, you are too quiet. You are not leadership material. We need louder thinkers who can match where Horizon is going. 16 years of documented results, I said. That has not changed. Exactly, he replied. 16 years of the same thing. We want innovation, energy. Rowan slid the folder toward me. This outlines your severance package. It is effective today. I opened it. A few weeks of pay. A generic thank you line. 16 years reduced to a template. But then I saw the final page, the termination language. A phrase I once wrote for Richard Pike flashed like a strike of heat across my mind. Involuntary cessation without cause. Those exact words activated one of the protections buried in the legal architecture I had created long ago. I kept my expression still. Do you have questions? Rowan asked. Yes, I said quietly. I will need a printed copy of my original employment contract, the version signed by your father, Landon. He shrugged. Fine, get her whatever she wants. She is leaving anyway. Rowan hurried out to retrieve it, unaware of what she was handing me when she returned. I placed both documents inside my bag and stood. My heartbeat was steady, almost calm. Landon smiled, thinking he had just dismissed a minor inconvenience. He had no idea what he had triggered. I held myself together until I reached my townhouse near the Brandywine River. The door closed behind me, and the quiet, usually comforting, hit like a blunt edge. I dropped my bag, leaned against the counter, and let the humiliation spill out in sharp, shaking breaths. 16 years. Dismissed as if I had been an inconvenience on the payroll. I pressed my palms against my eyes until the pressure steadied the trembling. Bills lay scattered where I had left them earlier in the week. Tuition, utilities, insurance, all of it suddenly heavier now that I no longer had a title at Horizon. My phone vibrated, a text from my daughter, Lila. Are you okay? Mom, you sound tired. I wiped my face and typed back. I'm fine. Long day. A lie wrapped in motherly instinct. I forced myself to the table, pulled the contracts from my bag, and opened the original employment agreement signed 16 years earlier. My handwriting filled the margins notes I once scribbled during long nights in that warehouse office. Then I opened the master licensing framework. My pulse slowed, my breathing evened. Page 147. I turned to it with the familiarity of someone revisiting an old scar. The sovereignty clause sat exactly where I had buried it. It stated that any global expansion of Horizon's licensing rights required my direct oversight and a specific termination procedure to maintain legal continuity. Without me, the entire $800 million licensing structure could be contested. Landon's involuntary cessation without cause triggered the breach cleanly, predictably. I whispered into the empty room. You never even read this far. My phone buzzed again, this time with a news alert showing Horizon celebrating a massive upcoming international deal. The timing could not have been worse for them, or better for me. I closed the binder gently, my hands steady for the first time all day. 2 days after I found the clause on page 147, my phone lit up with a flood of notifications. Landon Pike had posted a glossy announcement on every platform he could find. Horizon Systems enters a transformative partnership with Vorburg Data Solutions. A $200 million expansion. Global reach. Borderless innovation. Reporters reshared the headline with lines like visionary leadership and the new era of licensing. In one photo, Landon stood on stage under bright lights, arms wide as if he were presenting the sun itself. These contracts practically run themselves, he told a crowd of investors. I stared at the screen. He was celebrating a deal resting on a foundation he had already cracked. I opened my laptop and drafted a short email to Vorburg's legal department. No threats, no accusations, just a simple inquiry. Please ensure that all clauses requiring signatory continuity for Horizon's global licensing authorization were properly executed. Certain provisions may require verification before expansion can be considered final. I added a PDF excerpt, noting page numbers. Then I pressed send. The response came faster than I expected. Within hours, Vorburg requested supplemental documentation. By evening, the scheduled wire transfer $200 million was placed under temporary review. At Horizon, the panic began. A former colleague called me breathlessly. Maris, something is happening with the deal. The board is demanding updates. Dane is tearing through old files like a man possessed. I listened quietly. They keep asking if any continuity clauses exist, he said. Landon looks sick. I thanked him and hung up. My phone buzzed again, an unknown number from the office. They wanted answers. I closed my laptop with a slow, steady motion. The pressure they felt was only the beginning. They called me early the next morning. Rowan from HR sounded strained, as if she were reading from a script written under duress. Maris, leadership needs you to come in. There are questions about the Vorburg deal. They require clarification. Clarification. The word tasted like panic disguised as professionalism. I arrived at Horizon's headquarters with my briefcase in hand. The same receptionist who avoided eye contact on my last day now looked at me with open apprehension. "They're waiting in conference 1, she whispered. Inside. The air was thick. Dane Vickers stood at the center of the room, jaw tight, tie loosened. Landon hovered near the whiteboard, arms crossed, trying to appear composed. A faint sheen of sweat betrayed him. "Maris," Dane said, nodding stiffly. "We appreciate you coming in to help clear up the inconsistencies," Landon added. "This is a misunderstanding. Vorburg overreacted to something you sent. We need to correct it." I set my briefcase on the table. "What exactly do you believe I said you implied?" Dane began. "That our global authorization may not be fully valid." "That is misleading," Landon smirked, attempting confidence, which is ironic, considering you've never been good with contracts. The insult rolled off me this time. I opened the briefcase. Extracting a single folder, "I did not imply anything," I said. "I simply asked if they had confirmed compliance regarding signatory continuity." I slid the folder across the table. "Since you seem uncertain, I brought documentation." Dane hesitated before touching the folder. "What is this, the truth?" I said. "Page 147, the section you never reached." Landon's eyes narrowed. "If this is another one of your dramatics, it is not dramatics," I replied. "It is the legal foundation your father approved 16 years ago, and the foundation you violated." Silence pressed against the windows. None of them spoke. I had not come here to plead for a job. I had come to discuss consequences. I pulled the contract toward me, its weight familiar in my hands. Dane watched, his confidence thinning with every page I turned. Landon tried to look bored, but his foot tapped an uneven rhythm against the floor. "Page 147, I said quietly. Dane swallowed. "Maris, whatever you think," I slid the open binder across the table. "Read it." He hesitated, then lowered his eyes to the text. His face drained almost instantly. The room sharpened around his silence. Landon stepped forward. "What does it say?" Dane did not look up. "It states that Horizon is prohibited from executing any global licensing expansion without Maris Calder as an overseeing signatory, or without a compensatory structure equivalent to her drafted role." His voice thinned. Her termination was improper. "It dissolves continuity," I clarified, "which means your expansion deal with Vorburg lacks valid authorization. The legal term is non-compliant execution. If filed, it could appear fraudulent." Landon's breath hitched. "That cannot be right. You are twisting something." I reached into my briefcase again and placed a second document beside him. "This is Clause 58, wrongful termination. It entitles me to a percentage of all global licensing revenue retroactive to the date the framework launched." He stared at it as if the words might rearrange into mercy. "How much enough?" I said. "Enough that ignoring me became the most expensive mistake of your career." Landon fell into his chair, the bravado collapsing with him. Dane rubbed his temples, murmuring about regulatory exposure and board liability. I folded my hands. "You can honor the clauses you ignored, or you can watch your father's company implode." The door opened moments later as board members filed in, faces grim. They conferred briefly, then pushed a settlement packet toward Landon. "You will sign," one of them said, in wet ink. An apology letter lay beneath it, also awaiting ink. Landon's hand shook as he wrote his name. When he finished, I gathered the documents, my leverage now transformed into choices I finally owned. The settlement cleared 2 days later. Rowan from HR called to confirm the transfer. Her voice tight with the effort of sounding neutral. I thanked her, closed the call, and stepped out of Horizon's tower for the last time. The doors slid shut behind me with a clean metallic sigh, as if the building itself were relieved to release me. Wilmington's river air carried a soft chill. I walked without hurry, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders in small, decisive increments. 16 years of being overlooked drifted off me like dust shaken loose. That evening, I sat across from my daughter at a quiet bistro she loved. Leela leaned forward, eyes wide. You really did it. Mom, I did, I said, and I am not going back. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You look lighter. I feel it, I said, and meant it. By the end of the week, I closed on a modest cottage outside the city, a white-paneled house with a porch that faced a line of old maples. The realtor talked about potential renovations. I listened. But my attention kept drifting to the sunlight spilling across the empty living room floor. When I set up my small home office, I unpacked one final item, a framed page taken from a copy of the original licensing framework. Page 147. I hung it above my desk. Its language, once buried and ignored, stood now as a quiet reminder of the power people overlook when they refuse to read beyond what is convenient. Late that night, I sat alone in the new space, letting the stillness settle. The house hummed softly around me, the kind of silence that felt earned rather than imposed. Somewhere in Wilmington, boardrooms would be recalculating, executives choosing their words more carefully, Landon learning the true cost of certainty without comprehension. And here, in this quiet room, I understood something simple and steady. The things they dismissed in me, silence, precision, patience, were never weaknesses. They were the very tools that allowed me to rewrite my life.